It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.
We're back. Hello, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Today we have Peter Lawrence.
Hi there.
With us. Jordan Schaefer.
Hey.
Is joining us from some faraway planet.
True.
And Ian Remembera.
Hey, everybody.
How did I do on that last name? Was I close?
It's getting there. It's getting
better. All right.
Yep.
Keep practicing. I'm going to nail it someday.
Oh, yeah.
So today we're going to talk about, is it worth it? We build these things, we automate, we do all this stuff. And how do you know it's worth it? And Peter and I had a conversation the other day where he asked me, how long it took to build. I made this little signature generator thing. And he's like, well, what'd you do before that? Like, well, I tried this and that didn't work. Well, what'd you do before that? So I was problem after problem after problem after problem and then solution. So yeah, it took me a day to build the final version, but there was a lot that went into that. So Peter, was it worth it?
I haven't used it yet, but I'm sure it's totally worth it.
So
I have not gone hunting for the signature generator, but I know, I will say this, having been at STG for one or two branding changes, it's totally worth it. How about that? As someone who's had to change their signature in more than one place, more than one time, totally worth it.
All right. Well, I guess that'll do it for us today.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
That's it. That's the whole podcast.
No.
So Jordan, you're a Java developer. And so you do a lot of code cutting and stuff like that. Are you involved? Well, you have to be. You're involved in, requirements and all of that stuff and knowing what it takes to do things.
Well, speaking of what you were just talking about, is it worth it? I just recently had at a client almost the same use case scenario, right? There is an issue where we have an on-call engineer and they receive requests during their 2-week sprints, and it's like they have to go into a third-party vendor and invite new users, right? Go click a button, send to an email, boom, done. It's like a 2-minute thing to do per request. Now the ask was, let's automate this so that we don't have to log in and do this. Okay, we have, ServiceNow is kind of the request in thing, and then it gets sent to my team through an email. Great, that's already working. The request form comes to me. Now I have to figure out how to integrate that with the third-party vendor to initiate that other email to be sent to new user. And I spent some time, we had a spike set out for this, and spent a lot, the amount of time that I spent on it, a couple, hours on this, is more time than we would spend on that for the rest of the year, actually doing those requests. So I presented some solutions at the end of that to say, here's, 3 options that are, A is pretty good, B is okay, and C is like last resort that would work, but probably not recommended, and said, is it really worth it to implement any of these? The time spent, the development time, are you getting back an ROI on this? Like, 1 sprint's worth of work, are you going to be getting your money back? Solving this issue that's, like a 1 to 2 minute task per request. My recommendation was put it on the backlog. It's not high priority right now.
With the lowest priority possible.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. Let me flip that a little bit. Let's say you get 400 of those requests every single day. Now, is it worth it?
It would definitely increase the priority of that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a thing where, like I said, it's, 0 to 5 requests every 2 weeks, so if it was hundreds a day, yes, I would say this is worth it. We need to invest to do this so it's automated. Nobody needs to, worry about it other than the maintenance aspect of it. So go for it.
So Ian, on the digital operations side, you're kind of working on the technology and process. So you deal with this a lot.
Yeah.
When you kind of outline these things. What do you run into?
Sorry, I missed you in the last part there.
Oh, what do you run into when you're solving business problems? Do you have to evaluate, is it worth it or not? Like, what's it going to do? What's going to save us? What's going to add?
Yeah, definitely. Just like what Jordan talked about. A lot of times what we're looking at, or maybe the word for it is called cost analysis, right? So a lot of the clients or customers trying to find out, okay, whatever solution we're implementing, is it maybe going to save us money or not save us money at the end of the day? Which, begs the question, is it worth it? So a lot of people are talking in terms of financial figures, right? So once you do your analysis and you figure out, okay, maybe this is going to save you a couple X dollars at the end of the year, then it's probably a worth investment versus if it's just going to break even, or let's say the cost of implementing the solution is more than the solution itself, then there's no pretty much a point of doing that because we're putting in more energy than we're putting out. So the right part would be cost analysis. So before you even go on and implement any solution, you just want to kind of do an evaluation in terms of, okay, what are the pros, what are the cons, how much time consumption is going to be invested in this project, and what are the outcomes. Just like Jordan talked earlier, if the solution is going to be issued for something that is, let's say, a number of 0.5 or maybe 0 to 5 a year or maybe a month, may not really make as much sense going down that road versus if it's maybe 400 a month or maybe 400 a year, when the numbers is more, and then it may make sense investing in such a dialogue with such a solution. So the cost analysis portion is really important, and I think that's a lot of kind of like the first step before indulging any project, and getting the conclusion from that is what gives a green light for a project, or maybe red light that this may not be a worth project in terms of investing time or financial resources.
Oh, so let's take your example, Kyle. When you did the cost analysis, when you first got that email that we still haven't quite covered yet, but we'll get there. We'll break it down. You received an email with a couple of things and said, "Hey, can we make this for everybody?" Right?
Yeah.
What would it take?
Right. So I received an email with 4 signatures, 4 versions of it. How do we implement this? And so it was, like, you give me a problem, I'm going to work on it. Yeah, I'm like a dog that if you leave the whole bag of dog food on the floor, he's going to eat all of it. So it was, like, okay, how easy is it for somebody to take that and update it with their info and then copy it and then add it as a signature in Outlook, online or desktop version? And so it's like, well, can you roll this out, with PowerShell or something like that? Could I do this with maybe an in-text form that updates the code?
Yep.
So I was looking at all these different options, and one thing I tried is, can I just stick this on a SharePoint page? Your name, your 555 phone number, and like the examples, and then instructions, drag, copy, open up this, paste it in there. And when I was working with it, some of the edits cause problems. All of a sudden it's a different font. The line moves up. Like, I didn't create the HTML.
Right.
I did it, where the images are stored, and then sizing properly. When I sent it to somebody, the divider was like 6 feet tall, and that's not good. So it was solving one problem after another, putting myself in the shoes of an end user that has to do it.
So were you, I mean, it sounds to me like you're almost creating the analysis that said we better automate this, because if I leave it up to the users, I've shown 30 different ways that they can do this wrong already, and I've barely got scratched the surface.
It's the, how do you make this, well, the term is foolproof, but I don't really think of people as fools. That would be just mean.
It's not what the
No,
poster
it's,
behind you
it's
says.
like, this is something that, am I going to have to go into every computer in the company and do it for them?
Just stop by all.
I could send it out,
drive around the cities, take some trips.
Maybe
Get reimbursed.
you start looking at percentages. Okay, there's 25% of the people that are going to be able to do this without problems. They're going to get lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And I need it to be like 90%, 95%. So all those things, any problem I ran into, it was kind of a showstopper.
Right.
All right. And I had to simplify the HTML. I couldn't use style sheets. I had to do inline styles. I had to size the images like the correct size for the table they were in. Otherwise, when I pasted them in, the divider was, 15 feet high.
Yeah.
I heard 6,
So,
but maybe 15.
all those things, you sort of start going down a rabbit hole, and then am I getting into the sunk cost fallacy?
Right.
Where I got to keep going because I have to keep going.
Well, you were even asked, right?
I was just asked, how do we roll this out?
But weren't you prompted like, hey, Kyle, I know you're working on this. Do we need to do it a little bit easier way or?
Oh, I was given an out a few different times.
Right.
I'm like, no, this is like, I don't want the pain and suffering to be out there because it's going to come back and then I'm going to have to
It's going to be more pain and suffering for Kyle. So, yeah.
Which, that's the job I, signed up for. So I can't get too bent out of shape, but still, the pain and suffering on the user side is something I care about. So,
well, and it flashes back to you. So,
yeah. There's, you talk about the cost analysis, there's intangibles there as well. It's like when you build an intranet for a company, you can have analytics and all that stuff hooked up, but your best measure is, are people complaining or not? And that wasn't mine. I heard that from a speaker at SharePoint because she did a presentation on ROI. There's a lot of rabbit holes with SharePoint. Like how do you figure out those intangibles? And then Peter, you and I saw the Greg Case presentation at OSN.
We did.
About automating processes, and he had a big equation for calculating is it worth it or not. I'd like to get my hands on it, but I think it's like a trade secret.
I suspect it was in the slides, and you probably have some sort of access to that.
Like one of the nuggets I took away from that is a long view. Maybe it's not worth it today, maybe not in a year.
Right.
But maybe it starts paying you back like 2 years down the road, 3 years. So what's the longevity of the solutions we build? How long, Ian, with all the changes in technology and cloud and all that happening at such a rapid pace, how long does your stuff last? You better say forever.
No, definitely not forever. I think in our industry, in the tech industry, changes are very abrupt in terms of technology, updates coming here and there. So it's a hard thing to have one solution to justify your needs for a long period of time. In most cases, it would be for a specific period of time, maybe 1, 2, 3 years, and that's very apparent with our industry. Now, when it comes to the question of, is it worth it or not? I would like to use a more prominent example. Maybe something we all relate to. I would say maybe mobile phones, right? In terms of every year, we do know that the latest update, either it be a new iPhone app and all that, right? And we all know, I'm sure we all have friends, family who are always onto the new gadget that comes out, they're onto it, right? And we know, maybe the uncle or the dad who's stuck to his 10-year-old phone, and is still using it. So then it really begs the question, is that worth it? Now, from a technology perspective, we do realize that there's changes in technologies, and a lot of these devices, there's going to be some differences in terms of maybe specs, design, technology inputs, and, stuff like that. Now, I was doing some research and I read that initially when smartphones had just come out, people are more open to getting the upgrades because this was something that was new. So I'm assuming smartphones came in about 2000, maybe 5, 6, correct me if I'm wrong. But with every update that came through, people were very more excited because it was something new that we weren't used to. Because the phones before that were like the flip phones or the touchpad type of phones. As time has evolved, the excitement has kind of wore down. And what I mean by that, a lot of the gadgets, and I'm gonna be specific to phones. Let's say a lot of the phones at the moment is the differences are not really that big. When you see the phone in terms of the design or in terms of the specs, they're really minimal, so I could beg an argument that, hey, I don't need to get my new iPhone because I feel from the looks and from the specs, it's pretty much the same phone. I could have a strong argument, but maybe the engineers at Apple may disagree with that, be like, okay, it's totally different. Now, is that the case? I don't know. Is it worth it? There's really no right or wrong answer when it comes to that. What I mean by that, I feel it's really a preference type of thing, right? A lot of people have different opinions and different preferences in terms of, getting a new gadget. Some people may be like, okay, I need the new camera because of maybe my work. Another person may say, hey, for the bragging rights, I want to tell my friends I have the latest iPhone, right? And that's a valid reason. Another person might argue like, hey, I just don't see as much difference. And the same things that I can do with my phone this year is the same things I'm going to do with my phone next year and the year after that. There's really no much of a big difference. So it really comes down to personal preference, where you lie with that. If you're to ask me, I'm more old school. And I was doing a little bit of research as well. They say a lot of people would at least give it 2 or 3 years before they get a new gadget. While, some it's every year. So I'm curious how you guys think about that, because I know this is something that affects not only us but also maybe your family, and you've seen this out there as
Yeah, I
much
want
as
to
I
know what
have.
phone Jordan has.
Um,
Latest and greatest?
iPhone, no, you can't see it there. iPhone, I don't know, what is this, a 12 or something? It's not latest and
12.
greatest.
That's so
Yeah,
old.
it's so old. No, so I don't personally do this, but I know, speaking to that, like, I think the certain carriers know that, like, the refresh for the people who want it every year, they're gonna go in and pay for it, right, and to get it. But for the, I don't know, I put myself in the middle chunk of, like, I don't need a new phone every year. I'm kind of on the probably 3-year schedule or whatever.
Okay.
But I know my carrier has like a thing that you can build into your plan to say, you're basically installment planning for the next new phone over 12 months or 24 months or whatever. And like they
Right.
offer that because they know people want the latest and greatest, or at least, every 2 years or something like that. And then you get other vendors who are like, give us your old phone and we'll give you a brand new one for free. Woo, come on board. So
Yeah.
like they're marketing to that sector too. But yeah.
I think it's funny, but you're right. The cell phone makers and providers both, I think, are in the market to keep you moving along the chain. There was a time where you could just pay infinite money and always get the next year's phone for
Yep.
free, right? So it was
Yep.
always built into your plan. Now there's new every 2 or something to that effect. I'm on the Jordan plan of new every 3-ish or so.
Yeah.
I bought a used phone. The last time and have had great luck with it. So I'm
Nice.
thinking about doing that again, just to see if I got lucky, or because I make my kids use used phones too. Because if you're gonna drop and break a phone, it better be the cheaper one, not the really expensive one, right?
True.
That's just smart. I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever made a really good phone decision.
No.
I had Windows Phone. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not
That's all
coming
I
out
have
with
to
a
say.
new one of those.
They're not
Windows Phone.
Yeah. I think Kyle, you're way
It's
behind
gone.
on that
It's
spectrum.
gone. Well, so sorry, Peter. So I know you kind of mentioned it, and Ian mentioned it too. Like just like the phone developers. So like Apple, I know they with their iOS and even with their physical phone, it's been shown that they as your phone ages, like it's just going to naturally degrade, like not like performance wise.
Right.
So like, yeah, your battery was one thing, but I'm talking about like the slowness of you doing normal app functions or texting or using the internet on your phone. It just like slows down, almost purposely like coded that way
Well, I don't even think it's on purpose. If
Oh,
you
it
look
is.
at like laptops and things that
yeah.
we use every day, a lot
Yeah.
of times those will slow. If you've ever been on a 5-year-old computer, you're like,
Yeah.
wow, I used to think this was fast. And it's got the exact same operating system on it that you powered it off with 5 years ago. And you power it on and it's just like, I don't believe this. What is going on? And it was fast at the time. So I think the expectations go up. The hardware gets a little bit faster. So yeah, they're going to write more complicated software because the processors in the phones can do things faster. So the older phones are going to be a little slower because they don't have the latest and greatest processor, and you're not upgrading that all the time. I don't
My
know.
brother still has a flip phone. So
Yeah.
Nice.
he's still getting by with that, but it's like, is there going to come a day where you just have no choice but smartphone?
Do you text him on your smartphone?
Yeah, but if I send him pictures, I'm going to get it earful. I have to email him pictures.
Because he has to hook it up to a computer and download them and then look at them, or
Well, his screen is the size of like a postage stamp.
yeah.
So unless he's got one of those like jeweler things,
Yeah,
he's not
little-
going to see it.
Well, I'm surprised, Kyle, you have a smartphone. So
Yeah.
kudos to you.
Kyle's the Luddite of us, huh?
There's like big advances will drive change. Like,
Sure.
the speed of 5G is way above and beyond what we have, like 4G.
How about
And I don't-
two-factor authentication? Two-factor authentication driving smartphones.
I mean, I suppose since they're
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
tying
Authenticator
tying you
app.
to your
Yes, that's a big
phone
one, too.
everywhere.
Oh yeah, having to have that physical thing.
Yeah,
that
that's a big one
second.
too. Yeah.
Just don't sign
Yeah.
up for two-factor, Peter. You'll be good.
I was thinking like the technology in there to do
Well,
it.
the Microsoft Authenticator app, the Google
Yeah,
Authenticator
yeah.
app, the little app that you've just makes it so you don't get text messages.
Yeah, so if my brother has to use an authenticator app, he's stuck. It's got to be text or
It's got
I
to
don't
be
know,
the text
key fob.
Yeah, text or phone call.
or
you
phone
know.
call. You can do voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
What a pain. Well, what I've noticed is when people switch phones, they don't back up two-factor authentication accounts, all that stuff. So I have to reset them.
Lots of resets.
So they have to reset them again. That happens every week.
Okay.
We got a lot of people that like technology and like to upgrade. It's fine. I don't mind.
It's a good thing.
Do any of you have 5G?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's like the normal thing right now because I have 5G too.
It's the normal thing right now. Do you
I
not
don't
have
have
5G?
5G.
Yeah.
How old is my phone?
How old is your phone? Dude, it's time.
You know,
Man.
so this morning I was thinking about it. So I'm an Android user, and I get a lot of hate from my friends saying, you know, I should join Apple. You know, for
You just
whatever
have the
reason.
wrong color bubble.
I know they don't like the green text. And I was thinking, I was like, okay, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't know, maybe when I have kids or grandkids, and maybe at that point maybe there's another new thing, new phone, whatever the case is, maybe new technology. I can't wait to tell my grandkids how I was trolled by my friends because I didn't have an iPhone. I think that would be a good story. But you know, we'll see when we get there. Because again, there's also a lot of shifts when it comes to these companies, and you know, maybe a couple years down the line, 2005, Nokia was the big deal, and then
Right.
BlackBerry was a big deal, and then you know, now it's Android and iPhone. But I feel like there's also changes when it comes to that as well. But this is just something I have in the back of my head. I can't wait to when it gets to that point and be like, you can't believe how they used to troll us. But you know, here we are.
Oh, yeah. My name is Kyle and I use Android.
Just say you're
Hello,
older
pal.
than the internet.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the extras, like Android is going to be behind typically, like the AirTag, the watch. Well, now Samsung is coming out with a ring.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah. It's like, what am I going to be able to get like a little nose piercing
No.
next? Is that
It's just going to
Right
attach
there.
to the edge of your glasses, Kyle, and you'll have 3 of them because when you switch glasses.
Yeah.
yeah.
And then you'll see the virtual like little screen off. You know. Yeah. You see them. They're gonna merge it with all the you know, VR stuff, AR and VR stuff.
I'm just going to get Neuralink and I'm going to have one. an
I
antenna
was gonna
sticking
say
out
that
of my
next.
head.
Yeah. You could be the
Yeah.
third patient. I think they're on patient number 2 right now or something.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, we're kind of in a business where we don't always get to see like what happens, you know, like the value of what we do.
Almost
Like,
never.
how did it turn out?
Right.
You know, once in a while, you run into somebody and you get to ask them, hey, how did that go? And what you want to hear is, great, we're still using it. And I've gotten lucky on some things, I guess, that stood the test of time and made it through migrations and all of that. And some things last longer than others. But like, you can't expect an intranet to go very long without some kind of a design change, depending on what industry you're in.
But the content's there mostly, right?
Yeah, the structure and everything underlying it. But then you got major changes that happen. You know, like Microsoft came out with a whole new front end for their SharePoint that handcuffed people from like making themselves suffer. Like, there's a lot of customizations and things you could do to mess up your environment that the migration wouldn't support.
Okay.
Nice.
And they said, well, we're going to put a stop to that. No more CSS. Like, no more breaking pages away from the page layouts and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, now it's like, looking back, it's like, you know, thank goodness. It's really slick. It doesn't have all the features you want all the time, but it gets better and better. And you can still do custom stuff in there. If you want, it's just harder. So I can make that little app. I can run a regular, just an HTML page, things like that, along with the other stuff. So, you know, that again, there's a lot of intangibles there. It's sort of like just a gut feeling. I mean,
especially
What
for
happened?
some of the smaller things.
Yeah, and in terms of you spoke of intangibles, and I'm gonna divert a little to something that we all experience in the workforce or with clients or even here at SCG, I guess. There is this notion, and I don't know, maybe more my generation, but there's this notion of email versus a Zoom meeting, right? I know we
Mhm.
have all been in meetings where you're like, I think this would have just been communicated by an email and vice versa, right? You get an email and be like, I think I would have expressed myself more in a meeting, right? And for the sake, there's certain projects that I've been on that, would need a daily stand up where I need to probably give daily updates. And there's some meetings where they don't need daily updates because whatever I'm working on is probably going to take me 3 to 5 business days to really get something worth of me presenting, right? So then it comes down to if I'm sitting in a meeting for 2 hours, it is something that could have been communicated via email, and I would have used those 2 hours to put in, to work on maybe the project itself.
Yep.
Then is it worth it having that meeting? Or if it's something that I needed to speak to my either project manager about or maybe CM, and maybe they're not available and I have sent an email, but that doesn't really express myself as much if it was on a video call, then was it worth me sending that? So I mean, modes of communication, I'm sure we've all been in that situation. So maybe I wanted to kind of pick your brains on that and what your experience with that so far and how you guys have maybe dealt with that.
Is that one of those I'm sending a text to tell you to call me kind of things?
Yeah, yeah. It's like texting while calling, right? Like, there's the famous line of, "Oh my God, I can't believe, he or she broke up with me via text." Well, what they're trying to say is they believe the communication would have been done either on a phone call or maybe person, right? So they feel that maybe the line of communication that was used is not worth the message that was trying to being delivered. And it's a valid point. It's a valid point. So if you're trying to, let's say, distance yourself from somebody, they'll prefer, either a call or maybe persons. That would make it worth it, but it's not worth it if you spend 5 years together and I send you a text and it's like, we're done. So, it really, it's kind of like in the same, I would say bracket. But yeah, even in the workforce, we see that too. And yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people would either at least scratch their head about, determine on what it is and what they need to communicate out there.
so it's, this is not just like a product, a device, like an application. This is your actual day-to-day
Yeah.
workflow for your team or even
True.
yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
do you do cost analysis on like your team and how you're operating and how you're communicating? Okay, let's get some ground rules out of the way. If I'm just transferring a piece of information, a text is fine.
Yeah.
If it's a discussion, let's not have a discussion by email that's going to take 3 days. Let's get on the phone or a Teams call. Do you do that on your projects?
I do that for sure. So there's often times where you're doing back and forth in Teams, for example, back and forth. Okay, enough. It's time for a call because we're just typing past each other and missing the communicate. The communication is too complicated to send, and so sometimes you make that decision right away. Sometimes you make that decision after you've typed about 3 paragraphs of text and go, no more. I'm going to just call, and it's faster. Jordan, how about you?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, and usually in that, when there's anything in depth to explain, text is hard, connotations are lost, and, it's a lot easier to hear it in somebody's voice or see how they're interacting with you on a video call or in person. If you're so lucky to be able to do that, then it is over 3 paragraphs of text, right?
Right. Sometimes you can hear them rolling their eyes, even in just a regular call.
Yeah.
True.
Well, I think, a platform like Slack, there's things you can do, like the whole ping pong, of, all right, thanks. Okay, great. We'll see you later. All right. When you can just do an emoji, like, you don't need to get the last word. You need to acknowledge the last word.
You're contacted all day by people from around our company, right?
Yeah.
How do they get you? Do they call your cell phone? Do they call the office and get transferred?
It's Slack.
Always?
So if it's my boss, it's email. or it's a Teams call. Most other people, it's Slack. One of our AEs, it's a text. They all have their own preferred method of communication. And you kind of have to learn that. I don't know. Some people don't read their email.
Yes, true.
And then
podcaster
there's an example of
remain
there
nameless.
was one of our communities that met and we're talking about something that really overlapped with another community, and somebody in that community said, "Hey, why wasn't I included?" And then I talked to the organizer and I'm like, "Hey, why didn't you do that?" "Oh, I sent them an email." "Oh, okay. So you dropped the ball. You should have known better than to send them an email. You should have sent them a text or called." No, my rule is if it's important, if it's an emergency, call my cell phone. Call me. And that's how I'll know. If you Slack me, I may not see it or I may not respond till the next day. I don't like texting on my phone because I have, a pack of bratwursts for fingers and it's hard to hit the buttons. I don't like that.
I need to know
I'm
that's
less
the thing.
likely to check my texts.
You just
I was
need one
gonna
of
say I have
these.
small
Kyle.
fingers, so I can't relate to that. But okay.
You need a Bluetooth keyboard for your phone.
Yeah, maybe they need to create keyboards for keyboards for phones. I think people like Kyle would find that very useful.
Oh, this one works great with phones.
Really?
Mhm.
You should
There you go.
Bluetooth keyboards.
you should
They're
get
magic.
the old phone that like flips up and there's your keyboard, Cal.
Yeah, we just had
we
I had one.
Chad show us that last week.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Had the old
Yeah.
T1,
What was it? The Nokia slide out, whatever that
they
was.
had a bunch of
the
them. Yeah, it's like
Motorola,
Yeah.
the
Yeah, the
first
Motorola.
Android phone.
Yeah.
you gotta get one of those and be on top of it, Kyle.
Well, that's, like we're talking, technology wise, is it worth it? Way back, like I think it was 2002, Blackberries were a thing. Laptops were really heavy. And I had,
Yeah.
I had our real estate guy and our architect for it was in retail, big box, and they would always complain about lugging that laptop around, and they had Blackberries, and it's like, well, can I get, something that like a keyboard, they wanted all these things without, so I did some research and my answer was, yeah, I can do that. We can hook all this stuff up to your Blackberry, but you basically just built a laptop and now it's got like 6 components you have to hook together.
You just have to carry them around in your pocket.
All of them. Carry all of them. Little backpack.
So when you have to say, no, it's not worth it, and it's something they want, your kids want a new phone, not a used phone, or a customer wants you to spend a week to save them 5 minutes a decade. How do you deliver that news?
Well, I think most customers want to know that you spending a week to save them 5 minutes a decade would be cost ineffective. There's certainly a lot of gray areas. I know, like between Jordan and Kyle's examples, both of them are kind of, there's a gray area in between where it's maybe cost effective, maybe not. It depends on how many times you're going to do something, how frequently, and how long it took to do. If it takes 6 months, if it took you 6 months, Kyle, to create that form, I don't think you'd ever get that time
You're
back.
never going to get the return on that.
No. You might feel happy that you did it, and you might be smarter for learning how to do it. The reality is that it probably wasn't worth it to most people.
Well, if I didn't use Crutch GPT, it may have taken me that long. That's the decisions you make about this stuff and the speed you go. It's like remembering to stop and do cost analysis. Some things you're driven into and you got to do regardless of, thinking about, is it worth it or not? Like we had to go paperless in a hurry because the world,
there was some sort of
closed down for business.
reason for that, right?
I don't know what happened. Someone caught a
Mail
cold.
service
Anyway.
was slow.
Save our trees.
Yeah. But was it worth it? Yeah. That's another good indicator is, where has this been all my life? When you hear statements like that, those are what I think Jason Scherschlick calls delighters.
And, back to our examples, some of those are delighters, right? They might cost a little bit more than you were thinking, but but it's a delighter and it makes the users happy. Another thing to consider when we're talking about doing these things is how many mistakes it takes out of the system. You know, that's something that is almost incalculable sometimes. Is, well, they have to put a number in this field or the database blows up. How many times have we blown up the database because somebody put 7 in this field instead of SEVEN or whatever? Those
Little
kinds
Bobby
of
drop
things.
tables.
What's that?
Little Bobby drop tables.
Yeah, little Bobby drop tables. That guy's forever. And but getting rid of those mistakes or getting that data cleaned up, the cost of cleaning that data is huge, especially once you've acquired a bunch of it, right? So keeping it clean at the outset is probably worth it. Sometimes you don't think about that cost in your analysis when you're thinking about it, like, because you don't know, well, what possible problems could dirty data cause us down the road? Oh, we drop shipped the wrong thing to the wrong person, or yeah,
So,
or they put
Ian,
their state in the zip code.
When you do these projects, you're really kind of taking the human you want to take the human element out of the mix, streamline processes using technology, get resistance when you get people like, oh, you're going to automate me out of a job. Does that affect the cost analysis piece of it?
No, not really. It really doesn't. I guess the biggest piece here is definitely communication. You're communicating to your client on the advantages of you automating versus maybe it being a manual process, right? One of them could be probably time consumption, right? So communication is really a big thing. You're just being able to communicate, illustrate, or even demonstrate that, okay, whatever I'm doing is gonna be of good use to the company or good use to the client. But on the flip side too, it's never just a positive thing. Sometimes some of the solutions that a client can come up to you with, from a analysis point, it may not really make sense. What I mean by that, it could cost them more than what they think it's gonna do. So you're communicating that, okay, you guys trying to implement this solution may hurt you in the long run, and making that communication, in a positive note, not like, okay, don't do this type of thing, but I don't think this is the best way forward type of stuff. Because the technical aspects are always going to be there, Once you want something done, as a DevOps engineer, from a technical point, I'm going to get it done. But then also looking at it from a perspective of, as a consultant, am I doing you guys a service by implementing this solution, or am I doing you guys a disservice? So the communication aspect is really something that needs to be laid out up front. And once that is done, the technical aspect is something that can usually be done. So at a big issue from that perspective.
It's just the doing the work of mapping out the processes and, demonstrate whatever you said, demonstrate, articulate, motivate. I wanted to write that down, but I didn't want to. The sounds of typing, I liked it. I was like, oh yeah, I want to get that.
Okay.
So as we kind of wind down here, my parting thoughts is maybe it's worth it.
I think it depends on each situation. That's kind of what we talked about. There's a lot of factors involved, and doing, you don't have to do the full formal analysis, but maybe, weighing stuff in your head about how long it's going to take, how much time am I saving, is it worth it to whoever this affects or helps save time for, stuff like, all that kind of breakdown, just in your head, and even just in conversation too. Like, we were talking about that, like the urgency. How can I get a hold of Kyle the fastest? If it's really urgent, I'm going to call him, right? Yeah. Slack, I don't really expect a response right away, but just hey, have you thought of this? Or I need to talk to you, or blah, 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 right? It's an urgency factor involved. So I don't know. Is it worth it? I think it depends on every
use case,
every situation. Yeah.
All right.
I guess my parting question is sorry, Peter, go ahead.
I'm going to jump right on my parting thought, man.
Communication. Is it worth it?
I'm bad at this. What can I say?
Sometimes I think with developers, we tend to act first and think, or sometimes not even think at all, just act. And if you stop and think at several points along the process to decide, is this worth it? I think that's a good question to ask yourself.
Is 5G worth it?
Oh, 100%.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to switch phones, I think. So I want to go do that. So I think with that, we can wind her up and say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.